As the war in Iran drags on, its effects impact the entire globe, with Ukraine allegedly facing a threat of arms deliveries disruptions. To talk about it and more, we're joined by Philippe Dickinson, Deputy Director of the Transatlantic Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council. Good evening.
Good evening.
So the Washington Post claims that the US is considering redirecting arms deliveries from Ukraine to the Middle East. Now, do you think that the Pentagon has in fact put forward such a proposal?
Well, as your correspondent said earlier, only the Washington Post is reporting this at the moment, so it's yet to be fully confirmed. But what I think this does show, whether or not the precise details are true, is that the war in the Middle East has consequences globally, consequences for the war in Ukraine, not just with the energy prices and what that means for the Russian economy. It has consequences for the US's global posture around the world, and every resource that is used to prosecute this war against Iran is a resource that can't be used either to help defend Ukraine or to bolster defense and deterrence in the Indo-Pacific, which many in the administration have said is the United States' top security priority.
Right now, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is on his way to France for the G7 meeting, and Ukraine and Iran are reportedly on the agenda. So what decisions should we expect?
Well, I don't think we can expect really clear and firm decisions. There is what will likely happen is that you see some of the trying to smooth over the differences that have existed between Europe and between Washington over Iran in particular. To try and demonstrate to his boss back in Washington, D.C., that he is making some progress in getting some sort of incremental buy-in from European partners to support the American efforts, particularly to open up the Strait of Hormuz. European leaders have been very clear that they want nothing to do with the war in Iran. They were not consulted on it at the start. They do not see it as a strategically sensible course of action. But they do have clear interest in opening the Strait of Hormuz and helping in that endeavor. So whether or not they will be able to come to some sort of, tokenistic, incremental support to the American mission there in particular, that will be something that the Americans are hoping to achieve.
Well, this transatlantic rift deepens. The US president has once again expressed his frustration on social media, writing, quote, "NATO nations have done absolutely nothing to help with the lunatic nation, now military decimated, of Iran. The USA needs nothing from NATO, but never forget this important point in time." Well, is Donald Trump reaping what he has sown?
Well, I think there are some in Europe who would kind of say so. And after the Greenland episode earlier this year, I think there will be some who maybe feel a certain sense of schadenfreude that Donald Trump has certainly found himself in a spot of difficulty and needs European support, or is in this case the demandeur for support rather than the person who's calling the terms of the deal. But I do worry that that this can have a lasting effect on transatlantic relations and what that means for American attitudes towards NATO at the summit coming up this summer. I do think that it's in Europe's interest to find a way to give the president at least something of a win that he can claim that Europeans are at least supportive and bought in, without kind of committing wholeheartedly to supporting a war that most in Europe are opposed to and don't see much value in, and would rather was finished and ended as soon as possible. But Now that we are where we are with the Iranian regime showing that they are resilient and that they have found the pressure point to exert leverage over the Americans, the regional partners, and the global economy, it's going to be very difficult to extricate from this in a neat and clean way that allows the administration to kind of draw a line under it and move on.
Now, Iranian officials say that the US proposal was, quote, was reviewed in detail on Wednesday night by senior Iranian officials and the representative of Iran's supreme leader. Now, there is something very interesting in this sentence I've just read, namely, it's the representative of Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei and not him making the decision. So who are the Americans negotiating with?
It's very unclear. The exact status and the composition and framing of the Iranian leadership right now is really uncertain. As the president has said himself, they have wiped out a large number of the Iranian leadership throughout the course of the bombing campaign. Obviously, the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, on day one of this. And, you know, there are reports that the new supreme leader is injured and, you know, working through his office. So it's very unclear, it's very uncertain, and we're just going to have to assume that the intermediaries are people who can speak with confidence and assurance for what the Iranian government is looking at. One thing that is clear is that they have at least managed to successfully spread out and dissipate enough of their military leadership and assets to make sure that they continue to function in the middle of this very intensive bombing campaign.
Meanwhile, more and more American troops are heading to the Middle East. Will the US try to take Hog Island, which is key to the Iranian oil industry?
Who knows? This is something that I think we've learned time and again is a good idea not to try and second guess exactly what this president is going to do. As he has said quite clearly and in quite vivid terms to the Japanese prime minister last week, that the element of surprise is something that he really values very highly. But going after energy infrastructure would be a significant escalation and cause significant long-term damage to global energy markets. It would be something that I think would signal quite significant desperation on the administration's behalf if that was a step that they were going to really consider.
Philippe Dickinson, Deputy Director of the Transatlantic Security Initiative at the Atlantic Council, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.